In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to create a boss encounter using a Pokemon that you voted for. Hey gamers, welcome back to Game Master's Dungeon. I am Brian, your Game Master. So today we're going to go into the core rulebook. We're going to go over the rules in there about how to create a boss encounter. Then I'm going to take you over into my Roll20 game where I've already kind of set one up, and we're going to talk about all the different rules and some of the tips and tricks that I've learned in running boss encounters in my game so that you can take them into your game. With all of that said, let's go ahead and go over into the core rulebook and take a look at those rules. Alright gamers, so here we are in the core rulebook. If you're following along in your PDF, we're on page 487. So once you've already decided the Pokemon that you're going to use and how many levels worth of Pokemon you're going to build the encounter with, next thing you need to do, you need to take the Pokemon that you want to be the boss. You're going to apply a template to it, which is right here. We're going to go over real quick what the template does, and then we're going to go over into Roll20, into the game, and I'm going to show you the rest of the boss rules over there. So the boss template, first thing you need to consider is hit points. So even if you have like a level 70 Pokemon, it's got a decent amount of hit points, 100 and something, 150 plus. If you're going up against a party of 3 or 4 other trainers with their Pokemon, the action economy that they're going to have is going to whittle that boss down pretty fast. So what you're going to do is you're going to give your boss an additional bar of hit points equal to the number of opposing players' Pokemon turns and any trainer that is specifically built around combat, using moves, using other actions to attempt to deal damage. So say your boss has 150 hit points and you're fighting a 4-player party and they all have 4 Pokemon, and say their trainers are not meant for combat. So they've got 4 Pokemon actions to attempt to deal damage to your boss. Your boss is going to have 4 bars of hit points of 150 each. Now that may seem like a lot. They have a lot of actions to deal damage to you. And also, the bosses are meant to be a threat. This is not to be something they whittle down in a couple of turns and catch. This is a long, drawn-out fight. This is very dangerous. But the rewards, which we'll talk about at the end, are going to be well worth it. Now, another thing that it does, they need more reliable moves. So when you're building your boss Pokemon, don't fill it full of scene and daily moves. Give it a variety of at-will and every other turn moves so that it can reliably attempt to deal damage on each of its turns. And yes, I said each of its turns. We'll talk about that in a bit. Another thing it talks about is try not to build a boss encounter where the boss Pokemon has a lot of like supporting abilities, like Helping Hand and things like that, to where it helps a bunch of its minions, because the minions themselves will not have the boss template. Once the players take out the minions, the boss is kind of left defenseless. It also says here, especially powerful boss Pokemon can have their combat stages set above 0 at default. So say it's a single Pokemon and you want this like at the end of a dungeon or a long session and they're going through, you know, maybe like a cave or some old ruins, and they're going to come across this old Pokemon. Maybe it's been enhanced with like a magical artifact or whatever you decide to come up with as to why it's so powerful. You can even increase its combat stages above 0 to give it an extra level of difficulty to make it even more deadly. Just be careful. A higher level Pokemon, say like a level 60 base boss Pokemon, is going to have pretty high stats. If you apply combat stages to some of those, like attack or special attack or defense, it's going to scale those up pretty high, pretty quick, which may make it a little too difficult. So I would say maybe your first boss encounter, do not set combat stages above 0. Play it out. Okay, a little easy, a little too hard. However, make some notes. Your next boss encounter is where you can be like, okay, I have a better grasp of the rules now and how to handle them. and the kind of damage that your players can dish out, then you can look at setting these combat stages above 0. The next section talks about its actions and its initiatives. So I could read through this, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you over into Roll20, and then we're going to talk about how I've set that up and go over all of these rules over there. All right, so here we are over in Roll20. We're just using just a basic map here just to kind of show you what things are going to look like. So now, thanks to you all have voted for Machamp to be showcased in this video. So what I've done here, I've used the Gmax version of this Machamp to make it look a little more intimidating. So I just Googled it, found the image, created a token with it here. Now, what I've done, this is its character sheet, so the one we've been using in previous videos, right? The starter Pokemon, and then the evolution video, how we evolved Machop into Machoke. I've basically taken Machoke, turned it into Machamp. So what I've done, I've made this level 45 for this example. He evolves at 40. And then I've made him bigger because his size is only medium. So normally he would only be like a 1x1 square, like this. But I decided my boss encounter, he's been empowered by some kind of, ancient magic or an artifact or something, right? So, which has made him bigger. So, I've changed his height, size, and his weight class to accommodate that. We still have the same nature, adamant. I did all the rules on evolving him. So if you want to check out how the evolution works, I'll put cards up in the corner there for you so you can check out that video if you haven't already. And then, you redistribute his points that he gains after you change his base stats. Now, in this example, I've increased his combat stages, like I was talking about just a minute ago, about how you can increase these from 0 to make the boss a little more difficult. Which my next boss encounter, this is something that I'm going to do. Guys, I didn't do it in my first one, but I'm going to do it here to make it a little more deadly. Because my players are probably about maybe halfway through the campaign. So they have some pretty good Pokemon, as you can see here. These are my players. And these are 4 of the Pokemon that they have. So, Sarai here has a Mawile. Aurelia's got a Kadabra. Jezebel's got Archie, which is a Arcanine. Now, Arcanine is a large size base, so he is already 2x2. He's big doggo. And then we've got Sebastian here. He has his Luxray. So these are all Pokemon that they have, and I know the damage that they can deal. These are not their strongest Pokemon, but they're pretty good. They're all at least level 30-something, 30 plus. Probably maybe the average level is like 32 among all of these. This would make for a pretty good boss fight. But as you can see here, what I've done, I've given him... Now, Roll20 only has the 3 health bars that you could do. So, according to the rules, he would have 4. He would have 1, 2, 3, 4. Because none of my trainers are really designed for combat. Some of them have moves that they can do. Like Aurelia has baby doll eyes. And Sebastian's got a couple of moves based on what kind of environment he's in. He gains access to a couple of different moves he can use. But nothing really damaging. He's not going to go up and use, Mach Punch or, high jump kick or anything like that. So you would want to give him 4 health bars. So how you would do that, you just set each of your token bars here. Because he's got 127 hit points base due to how I've statted him up. So what I do, right? So say the green bar is his first health bar that he's going to start losing from. Once he loses that health bar, I would remove it. Then I would say go to the red health bar. Once he loses that, you go to the blue health bar, and then once he loses that one, then you would pick one of the colors and basically you would fill it, and you would be like, okay, this is his last health bar. So let's go ahead and talk about actions and initiative. Obviously, a 4v1, even with all of these hit points and the extra power that he has, only attacking once per turn is not going to be very dangerous. These guys are just going to dogpile this Pokemon and whittle through him pretty quick. So the rules state what you do. Let me open the turn tracker. I've already got it set up here. So his base initiative, because of his increased combat stages to speed is 15. So you give him his initial initiative of 15. And then you count up the number of Pokemon / trainers that deal damage. So in this example, 4. So now what you're going to do, you're going to subtract 5 from its initial, which goes down to 10. And then you're going to subtract 5 again, which goes down to 5. Now, if you attempt to subtract and you go below 1, any extra turns you need to give it, you then go above its initial. So he also has a turn at 20. So he's facing 4 Pokemon. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4 actions per turn. So, and then he can use any of his moves just like he can normally. Now, there's a few caveats to that. Some powers work a little differently. Every other turn moves work differently for bosses. So say as an example, on turn 20, he comes over here and he uses an every other turn move on Lux. Right? The players go through there. His next action, he cannot use the same every other turn move. So he would have to use a different move. But his next turn that he gets, he could then go back and use that first every other turn move he used at his first initiative. So basically every other turn moves become every other action. So if he's got 4 actions, he uses it at the first action, he skips, he can use it again, then he has to skip. Okay? Scene and daily moves are different as well. So say you have scene times 2. You could use one scene move at 20. You couldn't use it at his 15 initiative, but then you could skip and then you could use it as at his 10. So if he said scene times 2, he could use both scene moves in one single turn. So you can see that now he's far more dangerous. Especially if he has a move that is effective against certain Pokemon. In a single turn, he could potentially 2-shot one Pokemon. So if we go look at his stats here, I'll show you what I've done with this Pokemon. So what I did, I gave up Karate Chop. I decided that he's going to have Ice Punch as one of his tutor moves. So this gives him an at-will Ice-type move to deal with some of those Pokemon that are maybe immune or resistant to fighting type because he still has Brick Break. So his 2 at-wills are Ice Punch and Brick Break. He has Bulk Up and Focus Energy that he can use. So say one turn he uses Ice Punch, and then he'll say his next action he'll Bulk Up, and then his third action he'll hit him with a Brick Break. That's going to deal a devastating amount of damage. Because Bulk Up increases the attack and defense by 1 combat stage. If we go up here, you can see that I've already got his attack and defense and speed already increased. If he goes from 2 to 3 combat stages in an attack, he goes from a 42 to a 48. His defense goes from an 18 then to a 20. And then say his action after he uses Brick Break, he could bulk up again. So now we're doing 54 additional damage with all of his physical moves. So just to show you what this looks like, we'll use Ice Punch on this Lux right here. So even if he doesn't crit, 74 ice damage. So that this Luxray is just neutral damage, even if it's got a defense of, say, 20, it's still 54. That's over half of its HP in a single hit. And then it could, on its next action, use it again. Next action, use it again. All right? So these bosses are designed to be really, really powerful. Your players will probably go through several of their Pokemon. My first boss encounter, I believe my players were down to, each player had 6 Pokemon each. They were each down to like 1, maybe 2 Pokemon left at the end that were not KO'd. So that's kind of what I was looking for. Something really, really deadly, really serious. A lot of the encounters beforehand had been a lot of, catching Pokemon, this kind of stuff. Nothing real dangerous. the encounter kind of leading up, I kind of escalated the difficulty so they can kind of see, oh, maybe they're not prepared. You know, oh, do you want to go back to town and buy some supplies or whatever? Nah, we're fine. All right, so we've gone over their action economy, their initiatives, and how to handle that. So now about the health bars. So what happens, so once they start taking damage, so say this Pokemon starts taking damage on his green bar, we'll say he takes 20 damage here. They cannot affect other health bars. Once you start removing health from one health bar, all damage goes into that health bar until it's depleted. Now there's a bunch of stuff like, oh, what about burn? What about other stuff? So let's talk about the topic of those persistent volatile conditions. So how bosses work when you handle them. So say as an example, paralyzed. Say they end up hitting this boss with a paralysis. I used a little lightning bolt icon to signify that. But say he was, we'll say that the Mawile was able to paralyze it. So now its next turn, so it's 10, that is when paralysis would take effect. That's when you would make the check to see if he's paralyzed or not. But then his next turn, all that stuff does not take effect. Because this is designed that only it affects a single turn of the Pokemon instead of all the potential turns. Because if it affected all the turns, the Pokemon could potentially not get any actions if you roll poorly on those checks. So just notate whenever he gets a status condition like this, what is his next turn in line? Make a little note on your notepad or in Roll20 or however to notate that, okay, his turn 5 is paralysis. So every time it comes around turn 5, until he's cured of it, he has to make the check. Comes back around to 20, he can act normally. Another thing, talking about damage that it takes, so say like hail and sandstorm and things like that do damage every turn, like at the start of each of its turns or whatever. Normally, it would take the damage from those particular effects. It only affects the boss once. So its first initiative turn that it gets in a round is when it would take that. So say they've put Sandstorm on the field. It's 20 initiative here. It would then be affected by Sandstorm. But then once it gets to the rest of its turns, it is not, because it's still the same turn or round, however you want to use it. So now let's talk about status conditions like, let's say, sleep and frozen. So normally sleep puts the Pokemon to sleep and it has to make a check on its turn to see if it wakes up, and if it doesn't get any actions. So what the rules say to do with those is to change sleep to drowsy and frozen to chilled. And it uses the same rules for it. Basically, if they're affected by those effects, they only gain half their evasion. And then when they make the check, and if they fail, they get -10 to their next damage roll. Also note that taking damage does not automatically cure drowsy like it would sleep. Let's talk about disable. So disable is an ability to basically prevent a Pokemon from using one of its moves. Now say the 4 players each had a disabling move on their Pokemon. The rules for boss is that only a single move at any time can be disabled. This prevents 4 Pokemon from all hitting it with disable to disable 4 of its attacks. If that was not the case, the boss would be very easy to deal with, regardless of how many hit points and combat stages and other things that you've given it. And also, a boss can only be affected by flinch on one of its turns per full combat round. This is to prevent it, once again, from being consecutively flinched by the other trainer's Pokemon to keep it from gaining any actions. So once again, we're over here in the core rulebook. I want to talk about what it says to do with a boss when it loses a hit point bar. There's a list of several things that could potentially happen here. So there's some positive things and some negative things. So here's what I do with them. So say my Pokemon has 4 health bars. I'm going to go ahead and plan out which one of these effects I'm going to have happen when it loses a particular health bar. So say maybe the first two, it'll become flinched. So the first one, it's flinched, it loses its next turn. This will give the players a little bit of a reprieve for 1 turn of damage that it's going to deal. The second health bar, we're going to make it vulnerable till the next time they are hit by a damaging attack. Now say it's down to its last 2 bars. So when that happens, say when it loses its third bar, we're either going to give it 1 combat stage, or maybe we'll give it the use of a scene frequency move back. Say the boss is getting desperate now, it's powering up, right? So now we're going to increase the combat stage or one of its scene moves that was really devastating. We're going to give it back and let it use it again. This system here is kind of designed for the players to show like progress. So it's not just, okay, we drained a bar, we drained a bar, we drained a bar. There's stuff that happens, but also there's positive things that happen to the Pokemon as well. So you may fool them with these negative effects, but then that third health bar that it loses when it's down to its last bar, you give it some kind of positive buff to make that last health bar, those last few turns it's going to have, really devastating against them. So they're going to want to plan ahead and make sure they're going to be able to survive. Just know that the bosses don't follow normal injury rules, so there are some changes here. So if you do use the injury system, just make sure you look at this section basically right here. This is going to tell you how it differs from the regular system. So what happens at the end of an encounter with a boss? So here, this section right here talks about potential rewards. The biggest thing when it comes to rewarding experience points is to not divide it by the number of trainers, which you normally would. So say you have an encounter, in this example, of 180 levels, you would then divide that by 4 and then apply your significance multiplier to determine the amount of XP you would give your players. This, you wouldn't. So in our example here, so this Machamp is level 45. Now I always give my boss encounters at least a ×4 multiplier. My first one that I did, I gave it a ×4. I think going forward, I'm going to give it a ×5 because I make them very challenging. So I want the initial rewards, like the XP reward, to be worth it. So this Machamp is level 45. Say we give it a ×5 multiplier. Each player would get 225 experience to apply to their Pokemon that took place in this battle. Now, most of these levels of these Pokemon would gain at least a whole level. From that, potentially maybe more. Of course, as you increase the level of your bosses as you progress through the game, the players will gain more and more experience. And also, if you have a boss that also has minions as well, right, you're going to want to include the minion levels with the boss level and don't do any division by the number of players. So say this was a level 45, and say there were like 2 level 20s, like little minions that he had. So that's an extra 40 levels, 85, right? That's quite the large amount of experience that it gains, but also 2 additional Pokemon, that's more actions that the boss encounter has. So now it actually has action economy on the players. So obviously it's more difficult, but the experience reward is well worth it. All right, so real quick, I know we've talked about quite a lot. Let's do us a recap to cover everything real quick. So once you've decided what Pokemon and what level you're going to make this Pokemon, stat it up, give it any additional moves and combat stages that you want to make the boss more difficult. Give it a number of health bars equal to the number of Pokemon and trainers that are geared and built toward combat. In this example, 4 Pokemon actions, it had 4 health bars. Obviously, Roll20 can't let you show 4 health bars. Basically, you just remove one, and then fill, whichever one you want. It's okay, this is the last health bar kind of thing. Then your actions. It needs action economy, so it gains a number of actions equal to however many hit point bars it has. It has 4 bars, it had 4 actions. Its base initiative was 15 because of its combat stages. You then subtract 5, give it another action. You subtract 5, give it another action. And then if it goes to below 1, you then give it actions above its initial initiative. So then it gained an initiative at 20. So it's got 4 hit point bars. It's got 4 actions, one at 20, 15, 10, and 5. Now when it comes to effects that make it take damage on each of its turns, it only takes that once. So its first action on each basically combat round. So in this example, at its 20, if it was burned, poisoned, and it was hail on the field, it would take the hail damage, the burn damage, the poison damage. It would not take those effects on any other turn for the rest of that round. And now say effects such as paralysis and confusion and things that can potentially prevent it from taking actions. Those effects take place on its action immediately after it gains that effect. So as an example, we will say here, say on turn 19 Conundrum, the Kadabra uses Confuse Ray. Confuses the Machamp, so now he's confused. I use this right here, the derpy face here. He's now confused. I would make a note that on turn 15, so its next action in line, 15, this is when it would roll for confusion. Whether it succeeds or fails, once it gets down to its next action, at 10, it does not roll for confusion, nor 5, nor 20, but once it gets to 15 again is when it would be affected by confusion again. This happens on all similar effects like that. Now, when the boss loses a full hit point bar, the book lists several things that can potentially happen. I would plan those ahead of time. So for each one of these health bars, you would say the first health bar it loses, it could become staggered. The second health bar it loses, it becomes flinched. Its third health bar that it loses, it could potentially gain 1 combat stage in a stat of your choice, or regain the use of a scene move that it had previously used. Those effects are entirely up to you if you wish to use them, but it does give your players a sense of progress as they're going through these health bars to see changes in the Pokemon. If you, in your game, use the injury system, you will want to read that. Like I said, in my game, I do not. Just know that bosses handle injuries differently than the standard system, and you're going to want to make sure you read and understand that. And then lastly, rewards. Remember, do not divide the experience the Pokemon gives by the number of trainers. So in our example, this is a level 45 Machamp. I would just multiply it by whatever my significance multiplier is. So say I give this a ×5 significance multiplier, a real challenge. 45 times 5 is 225. So my players would gain 225 experience points to apply to the Pokemon that took place in the battle. Now, boss encounters can be kind of intimidating. Your first time through, running it to make sure, do you get it balanced? Is it too strong? Is it too weak? Don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you have to, build one, and then during your game preparation sessions, play test it against your players and their Pokemon. Take an hour or two, basically get your Pokemon out on the field, put the turn order, and just play through it like you normally would, just to see how strong it is or how weak it is, and you can make adjustments there. Make sure you read through those rules. Now, they're all guidelines. You could really do whatever you want with the boss encounter, but I really enjoy the rules that they've got in there, specifically on that template, to make a single Pokemon a real challenge so it doesn't just get dogpiled by all the other trainers' Pokemon. The one that I've run so far was pretty devastating. That Darmanitan, he was able to two-shot a lot of the players' Pokemon. Once he chewed through their primary Pokemon, their strongest ones, and then they were down to just basically the filler slots on their belt. The ones that were lower level, or they hadn't been trained and didn't learn any moves, and they didn't have any vitamins or anything. He was one-shotting some of those. So this is really going to, make sure your players understand, hey, this is a real challenge. I would definitely drop some hints. Hey, guys, this is, they're in town, and then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to go on this adventure into this dungeon or whatever you've got prepared. Be like, hey, the Pokemon's got new items stocked. Would you like to go take a look? Maybe an encounter or something beforehand, give them a little extra cash or something, or they find a a hidden item with some cash in it or something that they can sell to get some extra money to buy those particular items. Specifically, if they've just had like kind of those like small, cute little encounters where they're catching the Rattatas and the Pikachus and nothing really difficult yet. I put in several encounters like before the boss as like increasing difficulty just to kind of show, okay, you know, they were burning through stuff. They used a little bit of the items that they had, and then they were almost out. And I was like, hey, you know, you guys are at the door. You know, you don't have it unlocked yet. Did you want to rest? Maybe go back to town, buy some items? And they were like, nah, we're fine. Okay, do you? Just give them all the opportunities to make sure that they're prepared. I guarantee after they fight one of these bosses and they get wrecked, and it's a, you know, and maybe they even beat it like my players did, but they see that they're unprepared for large challenges like this, the next town they go to, all right, we're spending all this money on potions and antidotes and all this other revives and all of this other stuff. Oh, I'm going to buy some TMs. I'm going to do this. Be ready for that kind of reaction afterwards. Because that's exactly what happened to my party. Like when they got to the next town, or they spent like 3/4 of their money buying a bunch of stocks of those particular types of items. And then when they gained levels, they put levels into classes or abilities that allowed them to maximize the effectiveness in such items. So it's going to be an eye-opener for them, but I believe that the boss encounters are a really cool way to run certain encounters at the end of like a big adventure. All right, gamers, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here. This is the last video I'll have out for this year, 2020. The next video will be next Saturday after the start of the new year. I hope you've all had a great year. I hope you've all had a great holiday, and I hope you all have a great happy new year. And I look forward to seeing you at the start of 2021. So until I see you again in the dungeon, I'm Brian, your game master. Happy gaming.